This summer is not going to be like others. We know this. So to come together on this very solemn occasion today certainly is a ray of hope. And as I mentioned before, it's just so important that we do this every year. I'm so grateful that the leaders in our community, the veterans, the VFW, and others take the time to organize this event. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be a part of it.
You know, the normal Memorial Day celebration and events includes a parade and then a very brief wreath-laying ceremony at the Wood County Courthouse, along with a 21-gun salute by the Ohio Volunteer Infantry, the reenactors from the Civil War, or Civil War reenactors, I should say. And then the parade progresses up into Oak Grove Cemetery with another ceremony at the Mound, which includes a keynote speaker, a poetic or a patriotic poem, Logan's Orders, which General Logan was a Civil War veteran, and he really began the decoration of graves to commemorate and to honor those who sacrificed their lives for our country during the Civil War. And then the Gettysburg Address, which is read every year also. And you know, I think we're fortunate that we are able to come together this year, even though there's a bit of a unique time with the coronavirus, but we're still taking a moment to honor the sacrifice of those veterans who sacrificed everything for us. So besides the parade, you know, the American Legion is trying to keep the celebration and the event as normal as possible.
Let us in this solemn presence renew our pledges to aid and assist those whom they have left among us as sacred charges upon the nation's gratitude, the soldiers and sailors, widow and orphan. It is the purpose of the Commander-in-Chief to inaugurate this observance with the hope it will be kept up from year to year, while a survivor of the war remains, to honor the memory of his departed comrades. He earnestly desires the public press to call attention to this order and lend its friendly aid in bringing it to the notice of the comrades in all parts of the country in time for simultaneous compliance therewith. Department commanders will use every effort to make this order effective by command of John A. Logan, Commander-in-Chief.
Good morning. Grateful for the opportunity to participate in this morning's very important event, and I'm thankful for those responsible for the organization of today's events. The Gettysburg Address was first delivered by President Abraham Lincoln on November 19th, 1863, at the dedication of the cemetery at Gettysburg. Although only 271 words, these remarks have become known as among the most impactful and important speeches in our nation's history. I'm happy to share these words with you today. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives to that so that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth.
Appreciate and thank you for asking me to participate in this ceremony today. I'd like to take time for those that took time out to be here or that are listening to it, watching it at a later time, to observe the recognition and honor of all those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice in the service of the nation. I would like to take just a moment and recognize those among us who have served or are currently serving, as well as any here who have lost a loved one in service. We are humbled by their sacrifices and your sacrifices, and we know that they are great, and we commend the demonstration of courage and strength that you have no doubt shown throughout the most difficult of times. More than 1.1 million men and women have died in wartime through the span of our nation's history. To put that in perspective, that's more than the populations of Columbus and Cincinnati combined. In fact, more people were killed in World War II alone than currently live in the city of Cleveland. This, of course, does not even begin to take into account those who were wounded or went missing. That number is closer to 2.8 million. Those numbers should truly humble us, as they represent people, individuals, who were brothers, husbands, mothers, sisters, friends. They were people woven into the fabric of communities across the nation. They were loved, they were mourned, and they were missed. It's hard to comprehend the moment when you send your loved one off to war. You watch them disappear out of line of sight, knowing it may very well be the last time you will see them, hug them, tell them that you love them. But this has been a stark reality for many families in this country. I can recall as a 12-year-old kid seeing my older brother, William Rock Matthews, volunteered to join the Army and leaving for basic training in 1967 while the Vietnam War was going on. Fortunately for our family, after 2 years in Vietnam, he did return with a Purple Heart, but in one piece. So our family was spared that dreaded telegram, the middle of the night phone call, the chaplain standing at the front door with bad news. My wife Jean's family was not so fortunate. Jean's cousin, Andreas McCurry, known as Joe, a Specialist 4 in the U.S. Army and a young man of 20 years old from Pontiac, Michigan, died on the 4th of July, 1967, as a result of hostile action in the Quang Nam province. His name appears on panel 23E of the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. Jean's family was notified of his death on the 4th of July. So while Jean's family remembers him on Independence Day, it's young men like Joe that we honor here today and honor and remember on this day, Memorial Day. As a Navy veteran, I thought I would tell you about another man, and a man by the name of Doris Miller. It's an odd name, first name for a man. He served in the Navy during World War II. He is known for his bravery during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. He was an African-American man who was stationed on the USS West Virginia on that Sunday morning. As was the case for all African-American men during that time in our history, he was designated to work only in the laundry and in the galley where food was prepared and served. However, that morning when the ship went to battle stations and a torpedo had damaged, wreaking havoc on the ship, Miller began carrying the wounded to safety, including the captain of the ship, who was mortally wounded. Miller then manned a .50 caliber anti-aircraft gun for which he had no training and continued firing on the enemy until he ran out of ammunition and received the order to abandon ship. For those of you who may have seen the 2001 movie Pearl Harbor, this was the man that was portrayed by Cuba Gooding Jr., where you see him behind this gun firing at the incoming Japanese aircraft. That man is actually, in reality, was Doris Miller. As a result of his actions, Doris Miller earned the Navy Cross for Valor, the first African American to ever be awarded that commendation. It was personally presented to him by Admiral Chester Nimitz, a familiar name to us, who was the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet during following the attack on Pearl Harbor and throughout the rest of the war. Miller continued to serve in the United States Navy after his acts of bravery at Pearl Harbor. However, he died in 1943 when a torpedo sank the ship he was on, the escort carrier Liscum Bay, in the battle for the Gilbert Islands. As a result of his bravery, the Navy later commissioned a frigate, the USS Miller, in his honor. However, most recently, he is being honored again. The newest nuclear aircraft carrier that is being built for the Navy will bear his name, the USS Doris Miller. That is the first time that an African American's name will appear on an aircraft carrier. So the reason I wanted to speak about Doris Miller is because I think it's important for a number of reasons. It illustrates, I think, the greatness of our nation, that when a man like Miller, a man of color and humble origins, who puts on the cloth of the nation's uniform and becomes a hero who will soon have his name on a U.S. carrier. He will join a fleet of other carriers that have had the name of Teddy Roosevelt, Ronald Reagan, John F. Kennedy, Dwight Eisenhower, and Nimitz, the admiral that awarded him the Navy Cross. That's pretty lofty company for an enlisted man who worked in the galley of a ship. He exemplifies the spirit of many Americans, regardless of their heritage, rank, or station, who rise to the challenges they were ill prepared for and performed heroic acts that save lives. That same spirit is not only in members of the armed forces that we honor today. We see it today, though, in our first responders, doctors, nurses, other healthcare workers in the face of this pandemic, and others who volunteer their time, talents, and efforts in some cases, and in some cases their lives, to others. This commitment to serve at great cost, while most often found in the armed forces and facing life and death situations, we are seeing today in the civilian world, in the battles to stem the loss of life due to the virus. As I'm here today on the Memorial Day as a representative of the Navy, I bring up Doris Miller for another reason, because for Navy personnel and their surviving families, it is often different than the families of other service members who have lost their lives in wartime. In the Navy, when a sailor dies in battle, their remains often do not come back. They are not buried in cemeteries like this one or the other national cemeteries throughout the country where their sacrifice is honored. Rather, they are entombed in ships that they went down with their shipmates in places thousands of miles away. Many know this by the virtue of the publicity that is centered around the USS Arizona, which sank in Pearl Harbor and contains the souls of 81 sailors who are forever entombed in that ship. This was also the case for Petty Officer Doris Miller, who is entombed in the USS Liscum Bay, as many other sailors have had over history. So we remember the men and women who served their country and are buried in places throughout the country, as we're doing today here in the world as well. But I'd ask you as a Navy captain to please remember that today the sailors who are buried in the sea as well. This is the reality of military service. This is what we take to heart on Memorial Day. We are able to be here today largely thanks to those who are not here today. There are many ways we can keep our fallen as well as our injured and ill veterans in your mind and heart throughout the year. We can't do anything for those that have fallen, but we can honor their memories by making contributions, donations, and volunteer opportunities with various veteran organizations. It can be as easy sometimes as helping a veteran to a medical appointment, befriending a veteran in a nursing facility, reaching out to veterans who just left military service to help them transition. Working together with friends, neighbors, veterans, groups, and entire communities, we can ensure that the sacrifices made by our nation's finest and bravest never go unappreciated, and that their memories are never forgotten. I thank you all for joining in today's tribute, and I ask that you keep our military men and women that are on the front lines now and the sacrifices they made, and your thoughts and prayers today and throughout the year. Thank you.
From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam, God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America.